This rock might finally hold the answer to the question of life on Mars. NASA's Perseverance rover has discovered a mysterious rock on Mars that suggests the red planet might indeed have produced extraterrestrial life. In detail, the rock is covered with some spots surrounded by circles containing iron and phosphorus. As with certain Earth fossils, these are typically produced by miniature organisms. Could we finally have discovered the microbial inhabitants of Mars? What conclusion can we draw from this one-of-a-kind discovery? Could our neighboring planet finally hide extraterrestrial life forms? Surprisingly, the chances are not as bad as one might think. Recently, specialists discovered a gigantic reservoir of liquid beneath the surface of Mars that they believe could be a world suitable for life. What is the common link between Albert Einstein's theory of relativity and a sensational discovery on Mars? It's careful in both cases. Einstein in German means a rock. But let's get back to business. What Perseverance discovered on Mars a few months ago does indeed have the potential to go down in history. The rover has been on Mars since February 18, 2021, where it carefully analyzes the landscape and rocks of the Jezero crater. And of course, this isn't just any random landing and research site. It is a zone of nearly 50 kilometers that was formed by a meteorite impact in the distant past and, until 3.8 billion years ago, contained a growing lake with tributaries. It is now undeniable that liquid water once flowed abundantly on the red planet. But the question of where all the Martian water went over time is a bit more controversial. In fact, a recent study came to the revolutionary conclusion that the water didn't literally disappear into space, but simply moved underground. We'll revisit this later. While Perseverance inspects the ancient river delta in Jezero crater, it is supposed to collect samples of materials to bring back to Earth and also search for possible traces of ancient Martian life. As announced by NASA in July, the rover might have found a bonanza. In detail, Perseverance stumbled upon a very particular rock formation on the northern edge of the ancient river valley of Neredva, which had never been seen before on Mars. The object of interest is a rock about 1 meter long and 60 centimeters wide, which specialists have named Chiava Falls. It caught attention because of some revealing spots. This is already the case with the large white veins of sulfate between which lies a distinctly more grayish-red material, indicating the presence of hematite. This is nothing unusual in itself, as iron oxide minerals are common on Mars. However, this doesn't apply directly to the dozens of small spots, only a few millimeters in size, embedded in the darker deposits of the rock. While these spots appear as irregularly shaped white marks, they are surrounded by rings of dark material. The rock is increasingly enigmatic, complex, and potentially the most important discovery Perseverance has examined so far. The exciting reason is that these leopard-like spots might indicate chemical reactions that microbial organisms use as a source of energy. Spectrometer research showed that the spots and their surrounding material contain organic carbon compounds. Together with phosphates and iron, they resemble the kinds of signatures that are often associated with microbial activity on Earth. The creators of such spots on Earth are often microorganisms that have left fossilized traces in the subsurface. Iron and phosphorus are typically released when miniature organisms reduce iron oxide. As mentioned earlier, Chiava Falls was located in a once humid environment billions of years ago, and thus might have created the ideal conditions for microbial life to thrive. But what does the discovery of this rock mean in the broader context? Has Perseverance answered what is arguably humanity's oldest question? Is Earth really the only celestial body in the universe to have produced life? The short answer is no, not exactly. The truth is that on Earth, organic molecules can often come from bacteria, but they can also form through abiotic geochemical processes that do not require living organisms. For example, we know that such compounds form in volcanic activity. If the material in Chiava Falls was also heated by lava, we would have to rule out the idea of tiny Martian inhabitants. In fact, a grain of olivine mineral, considered a solid component of magma, was even detected in the rock in question. Nevertheless, the situation remains complicated. The mere fact that there was volcanic activity in this area doesn't mean the leopard spots couldn't originate from microscopic organisms. As we can see, Chiava Falls holds many unresolved mysteries, and unfortunately, these won't be solved in the near future. Researchers note that they have largely exhausted their remote sensing measures. In other words, Perseverance has already bombarded the rock with lasers, X-rays, and photographed it day and night from every conceivable angle to understand what secrets this Martian rock holds. To fully comprehend its privileged insights, scientists must study the actual samples closely. But that can only happen once the samples are returned to our blue planet. Once the return day arrives, specialists will use high-precision instruments to determine if we are truly dealing with fossilized remains of Martian organisms or if it is simply the result of volcanic activity. Interestingly, Mars may not have ceased volcanic activity. According to this hypothesis, seismic data from the Mars InSight mission strongly suggests that magma chambers may still exist beneath the surface of the red planet. Yet, this is not the only exciting mystery that Mars InSight has uncovered below the surface of our planetary neighbor. The probe's data also reveals a massive underground water reservoir located at a depth of 11 kilometers. And when we say massive, we mean truly enormous. According to experts, the amount of hidden water could be enough to form an ocean 1 to 2 kilometers deep at a planetary scale. As we briefly mentioned earlier, the question of what happened to Mars water is one of the greatest ongoing mysteries in Martian research. Until about 3 billion years ago, Mars had rivers, lakes, and even a massive ocean. But a drastic climate change then shut that chapter, and the waters disappeared from the red planet's surface, only to remain trapped in polar ice caps and glaciers. However, these are not large enough to store all of the ancient Martian seas. For a long time, many researchers assumed that most of the water simply disappeared into space. This would have been easy for the solar wind to tear away portions of the atmosphere, and thus, fresh water into space due to the lack of a magnetic field. However, the team at the University of California, San Diego, has reached the conclusion that water may not have disappeared entirely, but rather infiltrated deep into Mars' crust. To analyze this exciting hypothesis, researchers evaluated seismic data from the InSight mission collected in the region of Elysium between 2018 and 2022. Seismic data had already shown that there is practically no water in the Martian crust at the landing site, but only down to about 300 meters. However, W and colleagues literally looked deeper and found, on the one hand, examinations have shown that the Martian crust is indeed porous and scattered with cavities, as was previously suspected. On the other hand, seismic data suggests that these gaps and precipices are filled with liquid water. In fact, these natural water reservoirs are likely to constitute about 17% of the rock they are found in. In other words, the data collected supports the idea that the planet's crust contains an abundance of water. To be thorough, it should be noted that this is not necessarily the case if the research results are only representative of the location of the Martian probe and not of the entire planet. If they are, however, and that is what is fascinating, the red planet could have a gigantic underground water reservoir stored in the deep pores of the rock. Given that the estimated amount of water in this scenario would be enough to flood the entire planet to a depth of 1 to 2 kilometers, another exciting question arises. Could we find extraterrestrial life forms in the underground water of Mars? Specialists answer this question with a simple but intriguing response. Why not? After all, we must not forget that even on Earth, there are creatures that manage to thrive under the most extreme conditions, such as permanent darkness and lack of oxygen. Michael Manga from the University of Berkeley, who participated in the study as a co-author, could be quoted as saying, "Since water is a prerequisite for life as we know it, I don't see why the underground reservoir on Mars wouldn't also be an environment suitable for life. Although we have not yet discovered evidence of life on Mars, we now at least have a location that could, in principle, support life." And now you have an opportunity to make sure you never miss another new video from us. Simply click the thumbs up button and subscribe to stay up to date. See you soon.